There are going to be some things that you'll come to learn about me in the next few days. I just want you to know that no matter how it may look, I only had you in my heart.
The man, the myth, the legend. He's here.
Oh, you mean Uncle Nico?
No. Now, I don't think you need an introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Dr. Noah is here today. He is the founder and CEO of SleepRes, medical director of Sleep Centers of Middle Tennessee, and a founding member of the Middle Tennessee State University Sleep Research Consortium. His goal, and I hope I've got this correct, is to make CPAP therapy better and more enjoyable. Dr. Noah invented the groundbreaking V-Com, which enhances comfort, reduces side effects, and maintains effective OSA therapy. He also developed advanced pressure modulation algorithms to make breathing on a CPAP more natural and comfortable, with these innovations expected to be available on PAP devices in the US by 2025, not long now. Dr. Noah, welcome to the CPAP Reviews channel, and we have a lot to discuss.
Well, thanks for having me, Nick.
Now, before we discuss V-Com and KairosPAP and some of your other innovations, could you share your unique approach to CPAP therapy and explain how it differs from conventional treatment methods? Bill, did we get it wrong?
Well, that's that's kind of harsh. My colleagues say, Bill, don't say that we were wrong. Just say we found a better way. My background is a critical care physician, so I'm pretty critical, mostly of myself, and certainly of my peers. I was just like the other sleep physicians here in the U.S. I worked very hard to improve adherence. Did clinical trials in my practice, and but everything was focused really on behavior. Trying to get them to wear it. So many of the things that you talk about in your different programs and on your website. But one day it was in April of 21. I got hit by the top person in one of the two main manufacturers about why I didn't use more of their product in my practice, and and we were using all their devices, but we weren't using their mask and as much. And they were mad and wanted us to use. I said, look, your reps have full reign to my respiratory therapists and sleep techs. If they can't sell them better than your competition, well, I'm sorry. I just care about my patient. And so that's my dog. And go get him.
Get him
So
on
anyway,
here.
yeah, right. Oh, he's a handsome dog. And so anyway, I went home from that meeting kind of like, okay, well, I wonder if there is science in the mask. I mean, I always just let my respiratory therapists and sleep techs work with the patient. And I wanted nasal pillows always more because of the physics of the mask. But I really didn't care whether they got a Philips or a ResMed or Fisher Paykel or whatever at that time. I just wanted my patients happy and I wanted them to wear it. So I went home and I started working. I said, hey, I started interviewing sleep techs and respiratory therapists and other peers, and I found out no one really understands how these things work. And I was really shocked. And then I started playing. Of course, I didn't know anything about how they work. So look, let's make it clear.
Yep.
But I sat down and I have a little physics background, and I said, I'm going to see if there's a better way we can do this. And Nick, within 3 months, I had made the first prototype of the V-Com.
Incredible.
I had local college students, graduate students, 3D print it for me. And what's amazing is the very first one I made was actually perfect. And I played with these 4 or 5 I had for several months, and the concept was right. People don't like the word backwards, but we missed it. The literature was there in the 90s. When I went back and looked, we don't need to be giving the inspiratory pressure.
Wow.
We have to give the end expiratory pressure for therapy. But since BiPAP and then EPR, we were giving higher inspiratory and lower expiratory, even though the original study showed that IPAP couldn't open the airway. So
Insane.
why is that? Well, it's because that pressure of 12 that the IPAP is set at, it's not 12 in the airway where we need it. And, we just missed the physics. We missed the physiology. And so there was this hole sitting there that I stumbled into, you could say.
You did. So did you start and work backwards? Did you create the prototype and then discover the literature after?
I have to admit, it's true. I said we should knock it down. And I'd seen a couple of the articles, but you don't see it sometimes. You can read the article, but if you're already brainwashed thinking higher inspiratory, lower expiratory, you don't consider the other side.
No.
It's kind of like in America right now with our election. One side doesn't consider the other. So
let's get into that. No, just joking.
No, we're not going there.
Forget
that.
I don't lose half my audience.
Just erase that from your recording.
I'll have to. So, Bill, who are you voting in a few months' time?
Yeah, well, we'll just not go there. So anyway, the point being is, look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it, but it's so true. We get to where we can't hear others, and that's why I brought up the political point, that we're so convinced emotionally, and we think it's intellectually, but we're just so sold into things we can't hear. I could never have heard this. If someone came to me and said this to me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have heard it. You see, pressure is force over area. And we're trying to give force to a small amount of area. The same pressure gives a smaller force because the area is small there in that airway. But in the lungs, there's huge surface area. So that same pressure is causing huge force to push the lung open. And people don't like that. It's trying to expand your lung, okay? It's trying to push open. And then when you try to exhale, well, now the area is even larger because you just took a breath in. So now there's more surface area, and you're trying to exhale, and that force is trying to push your lung back open, and that's uncomfortable. And so going through the literature, it made sense to me that we only had to give the pressure at the end of exhalation or the latter part. We can talk about that in the viscosity of the airway. It took me 6 months to convince myself, or I could really tell others.
What's the response from your res meds and other physicians? I mean, do they think you're a wacko, or what do others think? Put it simply.
So I can say this very clearly. Not one person on this planet has been able to correct me.
Okay.
Not one person has been able to show me I'm wrong. Not one person will stand at the whiteboard with me and debate this with me. Not one person has been able to stand up and say I'm wrong. And I'll tell you this, that we've gone around the world secretly and had key opinion leaders. Danny Eckert in Australia is going to be on our advisory board. Not one person has disagreed with the science. We're all pulmonologists. We want to ventilate everything. And so when you ventilate something, you give higher IPAP and lower EPAP, higher inspiratory, higher breathing in pressure, higher and lower expiratory. But humans don't breathe that way. Humans breathe with lower inspiratory and higher expiratory. It's more natural. And then for the airway, to treat sleep apnea, we don't need to ventilate them. They ventilate fine. We just need to stabilize their airway, which is at the end of exhalation. And so the reason the V-Com is there is because, when I did come up with the idea, there was no way for me to drop inspiratory pressure because no bilevel can drop IPAP below EPAP. So I had to invent a way to do it, and that's what the V-Com is. Just a simple, it's a dumb resistor that goes in there, and it's the right amount of resistance where it doesn't interfere with the algorithms or other things in the circuit. And that's why I released it at the amount of resistance I did. KPAP is worlds above V-Com. I have people tell me, "Oh, KPAP is V-Com in the machine." No. That's
really
that's like comparing a jet airplane to a rocket ship.
I can't wait to get into that.
No, the KPAP fixes the whole problem. V-Com just improves the comfort on inspiration, does nothing to help expiration. But KPAP fixes the whole breathing cycle.
Can we go back to what you just said before about the right amount of resistance? Are you saying that if you change those holes and make them smaller or bigger and you're changing the resistance, then it can affect the algorithms? How do you know? How do you know that it doesn't? I mean, is it just the physics that tells you that, or?
We did 100 patients. We did, 60 ResMed, 20 Philips, and 20 React Health BMC devices, and we tested to see if it affected any of the functioning of the different devices, and we found that it did not change therapy, and it actually increased usage time in long-term users.
Yep.
It decreased leak. It actually decreased the residual index. Wasn't really clinically significant, but it was statistically significant.
Just because you're not getting a different outcome doesn't necessarily mean that the actual device isn't sort of changing in somewhat, or does that make sense? I mean, how do you actually test whether or not the machine can pick this up?
We did 4 nights without well, you did, someone sent me something you did recently that showed the same thing. We did 4 nights without V-Com and 4 nights with V-Com, same patient, same complete circuit. Only difference was the V-Com. And their titration pressure with or without V-Com was identical.
Yes.
So if it didn't change their pressure, it doesn't change their therapy. And it decreased their leak. It decreased their leak by 1/3. Yep. By the way, the KPAP article we just sent out, the leak was reduced in half. Okay, so
wonderful.
If
wonderful
you lower the inspiratory pressure, you're going to lower the leak. It's just common sense.
That's my favorite. Really, my favorite thing. That's my favorite thing about V-Com, straight up.
Well, but the KPAP is light years beyond V-Com.
Okay. So V-Com's sort of in the rearview mirror, kind of almost now. Well, soon.
Yeah, that's why we don't really market or do stuff with it. The V-Com was my way, in a very safe, fast way to put something on the market, to introduce to my peers, hey, we might have been wrong about this. And now when V-Com came out, there were a lot of people that, well, I don't say a lot. There were 3 or 4 that spoke out, publicly, like, oh, well, it's reducing inspiratory pressure, it's going to cause hypopneas. And I wanted to say, excuse me, let's go look at the physiology. If you drop the expiratory pressure, like with EPR and C-flex and A-flex and all these things, you're going to increase hypopneas. But if you maintain expiratory pressure and you drop inspiratory pressure, by the time inspiratory pressure comes in, if the airway's gone, it's gone. Okay, it's too late. And now we just finished a randomized trial with KPAP where I'm dropping the inspiratory pressure 5 centimeters.
No.
And identical therapy.
Insane. When are you sending me one? Come on. When do I get that prototype?
Well, we have prototypes. I'd love for you to breathe on it and the difference. We could enter you in one of these trials, and then you could actually have one at home to wear.
I would love to be the test patient. Oh, man, and I'll tell you straight up how it is, and I'll give you as much data and information as you can handle.
Well, I appreciate that. What you're doing is you're around the world helping people who are struggling with a very necessary treatment, and we all really appreciate that. And you do it in a fun way.
I appreciate it. Well, I had a lot of questions about V-Com, but I think maybe we should just sort of scrap those and move on to the good stuff.
Well, no, let's do your V-Com questions, because right now the V-Com's available. People can have that right now, particularly in the U.S.
Yep. Okay. One which is quite interesting is, why do you think V-Com is effective in improving central sleep apnea for some patients?
So central sleep apnea, particularly what we call TEXA, treatment emergent central sleep apnea, that's where the CPAP or BiPAP, which is obviously much worse, triggers a central apnea. And that's all regulated by CO2. In other words, when you're asleep, if your CO2 gets too low, you're going to stop until it gets back up again.
Right.
And that's how it works. That's different than narcotics, a different mechanism. So the patients that have treatment emergent central sleep apnea, TEXA they call it, they all have what you call a high loop gain. They all have an unstable respiratory physiology, to where little changes in ventilation can lead to this. In other words, it doesn't take very much increase in ventilation to blow their CO2 below the threshold for an apnea. So just a little bit of increased ventilation will blow them down. Now, someone down here, now it takes more increased ventilation to cause a central. So my theory was, and I remember I had this theory when I was in France back in the fall of 21, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we caused this. We created TEXA when we put EPR and C-Flex on the machine, because we know BiPAP causes central apnea much more than CPAP. So I had this idea, but I couldn't test it till I actually, got the V-Com cleared and had it on, I could use it on patients. And and so what happens is, we know this going back before World War II with high altitude aviation, that CPAP, increases ventilation. Dr. Bishop, a female researcher at University of Buffalo in 78, showed that CPAP caused hyperventilation in awake patients. It makes sense that it would do it in a sleep patient, because that force is pushing your lung, trying to expand it.
Okay.
So my thought was, it's the inspiratory pressure that's increasing the ventilation. And in these patients with high loop gain, unstable ventilatory sort of physiology, that the PAP increases their tidal volume and blows them below that threshold. And so they've got their CO2 below, and then they start to cycle. They get below, they have a central apnea, then their CO2 goes up, then all of a sudden they hyperventilate, they blow back below. And that's what you see as this cycling, if you look at below. Yeah. And that's where that's TEXA. So I thought, well, if I could lower the inspiratory pressure on CPAP, then I would lower that force trying to expand their lungs. I could maybe return their tidal volumes more to normal, and I could resolve treatment emergent central sleep apnea. It's funny that C-Flex comes out in 2003, and my friend Robert Thomas at Harvard first describes what became TEXA later, complex sleep apnea, in 2005. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think we caused it, and we're all talking about this new entity just because we were giving this higher inspiratory pressure over expiratory. Just to see, any inspiratory over expiratory is going to augment the tidal volume. It's going to increase it a little bit, and therefore, now a lot of patients adapt to that. A lot of patients have a low loop gain to where it doesn't matter. They're not going to get down below the threshold. Let's say a lot of patients, 98% of patients or more are not going to. But in those that do, they develop TEXA. And so what we found is the V-Com resolved TEXA in each of the 20 cases we had.
What's your sort of recommendation in regards to using with EPR, in regards to using with bi-level devices and so on? Is that okay, or does it sort of defeat the purpose?
I'm going to make this really clear and really strong.
Perfect.
Okay, so I don't want to be misunderstood in the slightest way.
Great.
In our patients, we never, ever use EPR. Okay? It's absolutely backwards to the whole physiology of the airway. The only reason to use EPR is if you want to give them bi-level. Well, then give them a real bi-level, because the only reason you're going to give bi-level is to ventilate someone. People with OSA don't need ventilation. People with OSA and other problems that require ventilation need ventilation, but you don't need to ventilate the OSA. You need to ventilate their other problem, whether it's COPD, obesity, hypoventilation, or other things, neuromuscular disease. You don't ventilate OSA, you stabilize an airway. There's a huge difference. And when you decrease expiratory pressure, you are destabilizing an airway, and it's just wrong. And I just say it straight out, it's just wrong. And look, I was, the most to blame. We put everyone on C-Flex. Then when A-Flex came out, we put everyone on it. Why make them have more expiratory pressure? Because it's more comfortable. Yeah, but it's not therapy. And so if they need lower pressure and they can't exhale, you can give them a mask with less resistance.
I'll talk about this a bit.
Yeah, the resistance in the mask is building EPAP up in your throat anyway. So a high resistance mask is going to make it harder to exhale. You can give them a lower resistance mask. You can turn the pressure down. Now, the problem is it takes time. You turn the pressure down, you're going to have to bring them back in and turn it back up once they get used to it.
These companies, these manufacturers would argue that, they introduced EPR and these pressure relief functions, features to improve compliance and make it easier for patients. And I'm sure many would mention that, you know, they do find it easier to breathe out and it's a bit more comfortable. You just say no.
No.
Tough it out.
No.
Glass of concrete.
Okay. Let's show me a randomized trial where it improved adherence. You'll see it did not.
Really?
It did not. Bi-level never improved adherence. Okay. EPR never improved adherence. Look at the Cochrane analysis where they went through all of them. Look, it didn't work.
So what is it? Marketing? Is this some sales dude?
Marketing or I'm not sure what it was. I just know I believed it. I was guilty. David White, who you have screened his talk. David says if anyone's to blame, I am. I was chief medical officer of Respironics and Philips when this happened, and he had one of the largest, physiology, airway physiology labs there, and the most prestigious group there at Harvard. Most of the people that trained under him are now leaders in the field, and he didn't see it. So we're all to blame. We don't need to go at blame. We just need to go in the new direction.
It's great,
and
I'm excited for it.
Well, I am too. And, we're getting ready to start a multi-center adherence trial with it in a few months. And we've been working on it for a while, but it may not increase adherence, but it's like Nancy Cullip said to me when I was down there at Emory last year. She goes, Bill, if you decrease side effects and you're more comfortable, it's a home run. Even if you don't increase adherence, look, if I can give your mother 5 centimeters less pressure and the same therapy, why are you going to give her CPAP? Do you not like your mother? You want her to suffer with more pressure? And so that's where we think we're going to be successful.
Okay. And what's your gut tell you about that compliance?
We feel from our limited data so far, it's going to have a lot more tolerance and that more people will be willing to accept CPAP that weren't before.
Right. Let's move on to KairosPAP. So are you able to tell us who the partner is or not?
Well, there could be more than one.
Wow.
Wow,
there you go. Isn't that a bombshell?
Yeah. I can't tell. I will tell you that, the software part is from us. A lot of the machine features are from us. So in many ways, it'll be our device.
Maybe you can just tell us where you are in the development phase and what's next.
This is all secret. This has to do with forced oscillation technique. I've got a new way of doing it that is going to be different to find centrals, but I don't want anyone to know about it. That's what's interesting, is the engineers aren't thinking through that. And it's left a wonderful hole open for us to come to market next year, because we're going to have new masks too, and new technology in masks. Oh my goodness. I'm more excited about the mask than the machine.
Goodbye to everyone.
Can we talk about that?
Sure. Oh, there's so much more. C-Flex, EPR, BiPAP, they all are at therapy pressure at inspiration. We're 5 centimeters down. And I got a paper coming out this week in Sleep Medicine, showing we're rebreathing on these masks.
Tell me more. Tell me more about this.
I did testing on all these masks about 2 years ago here in my lab.
G'day mates, this video is sponsored by Sleep HQ. Upload, review and share your detailed CPAP reports with anyone from anywhere. Visit sleephq.com and join our free community today.